Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jimmy Wei Chen, and I'm co-teaching Unit 3 with Hyunggu. And so Unit 3, we are all doing individual work. So we will have 3 students to present first for 12 minutes and 8 minutes for feedback. And for Unit 3, I'm curious about where is the imagination from? How we get ideas to design a building form space. So I designed this unit as a simulation of doing a competition to experiment the idea of how much our design idea is influenced by what we see. And this is a customized Blender plugin. It shows the reference images in real time to analyze your building geometry and then show you a precedent on the bottom left side. So I kind of use this tool as a sketch tool to start to design space directly in a digital space. And we start from collecting images from online as a data set. So we choose 100 keywords. So each one of the students has 10 keywords about their impression of Seoul and their preference about architecture style. So in the first 2 days, we collect an image to find inspirations from images, and then in the midterm, we convert the concept or inspiration from images to the 3D model form. So each student has 3 concept model. So we made this in one day, and just to quickly to get ideas about the concept. And so there's no site, no program for in this stage. And then later, when the site got introduced and then the program come in, we start to rationalize the concept model to become a building proposal. So students in our units are all from different levels in their architecture education. So some are sophomore, some are graduate students. And use this as an experiment to see how can different level of students with no Blender model experience can use this as a sketch tool to design something might be like potential for future project development. So the first, we'll start from Johnny. So we'll have 3 students present first, and then 8 minutes for the feedback.
Hi everyone, my name is Johnny, and we're Unit 3 titled Apophenia, led by Jimmy and Dancho. Our unit explores machine vision sampling as a means to rethink how we use image information to compose our cities. So I've explored how images and color can hyper-stylize the architecture of Seoul. So my personal experience of Seoul, traveling the last couple of weeks, has been this delicate balance between the old versus the new, between day and night, from the traditional to the new, trendy, and the contemporary. So we began our research by looking at our personal experience of Seoul, the city, its architecture, and the objects, everyday objects, by compiling our data sets using Image Scraper and PyCharm. And so when I think of my experience of Seoul, the keywords that stand out most to me are Korean soju, the drinking culture, and the Seoul nightlife. So for architectural styles, we looked at the sort of styles that might inform our architectural influence as well. And so I looked at traditional Seoul architecture, so the Gyeongbokgung Palace, the Hanok Village architecture, and high-tech architecture. And to sort of contrast this sort of thinking and exercise, I looked at the architecture of James Sterling, Daniel Libeskind, and John Soane. And I wanted to see what happens when you begin to mix different architectural styles with the image styles of Seoul or its objects. So on screen here are some of the style transfer outcomes generated in Blender, where the results on the right begin to blur the boundaries of what it means, or blur the lines of architecture, object, and sort of concept artwork. And so these are some of the results from our findings for the first half of the intensive. So our sort of results become these stylized outcomes, and we looked at a site. And so our site was a library in Iljiro. And so these were some early sketches of the site, sort of a quick site consideration study from the findings, which is an old abandoned military base located in Iljiro, located between the Gwangjang market and the DDP. a site that sort of sits at the precipice of two contrasting styles. And so without access to the site, we began to sort of do some quick sketches of a couple options that might potentially become the massing studies of this site. And so these were some of the concept massing models we did in the first half of the intensive generated, which were an exercise based on the keywords. And so in a short period of time, we could generate a lot of interesting outcomes just from the design. And so this was the interim. And so I was interested in whether or not image styles can generate architecture of Seoul in this sort of hyper-styled fashion, the artificial stylizing of contemporary architecture through cultural objects of place. And so this was the massing model I started with in the second half, which led through a series of image styling transfers as a means to sort of explore further how we could apply image texture and style transfer. And so to take this further, we looked at these sort of images that began to inform some of the architecture. And then we started to take the components of potentially applying components to a UV texture map of its color, so it's RGB. And so you could sampleize, specific RGB components and then applied components to a UV texture map. And so this is the workflow that we kind of work with. And so following some of these iterations, this kind of tool allows you to explore some interesting outcomes. So the component that I looked at were sort of the aggregated known brands of Korean drinking culture. And so the endless catalog of different examples of alcohol in soju, cass, and makgeolli to sort of blur the boundaries between culture and architectural style. And so what kind of results through this kit bashing process could components of architecture begin to inform and present itself in the architecture. And so these are some of the outcomes. And when you look closer in a detailed view, you begin to see sort of this idea that our units focus around, which is apophenia, where these noticeable examples of sort of the Guangzhou market and the sort of site surrounds, but also soju, notable brands of soju. So a couple more examples. And so these are the detailed sort of explorations and findings. So on site. And so on the second half, we also looked at the program and how machine could generate the sort of internal library program through a data set. And so we used Pix2Pix, a sort of GAN software. And we took the generated floor plans cut through the massing model. And the sort of outputs that it came out with were this, based on the color that's trained so that each program is, pretty much generated for you. And I want to kind of highlight here that the model itself is a trained data set, but it's more of the tools that we're exploring. And it's not exactly the outcomes, because training the actual data model will take up to months. And so this is some of the process of how we begin to overlay that in 3D. And through that same process of color to component, begin to form some of the massing. And that generates the sort of program. And if you take a section cut through it, you can potentially get the program of the actual building massing. And so that's the outcome. I'm just going to finish off with a video just of our model. Yeah. And so that was the outcome that we had at the end of our 10-day intensive. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Yujin Ko of Unit 3. My project is Nest for Seoul. There's a saying, there is no food in the provinces, and there is no nest in Seoul. There are plenty of places to work in Seoul, but there are not enough places to rest. While housing prices in Seoul are rising, the quality of places for people to rest is becoming very low. Open space is currently being created to solve this problem, but providing open space to everyone means that no one can belong to that space. So I thought that people in Seoul should be provided with a personal and intimate place to rest. And it doesn't have to be a home. Based on this concept, I designed the library on the north of Hullyeon Park in Seoul. In order to consider the connection with Cheonggyecheon and open the Blackfish block, I planned the site plan as follows. For a personal and intimate public space, we created a semi-public space where we can choose to meet others at our own will, while having the purpose of reading books. And the two public spaces are either static or dynamic, so you can selectively use them. People can choose between them and enjoy reading. And the semi-public space that connects between them serves as the net for the people of Seoul. The following is the section diagram. The left one is the house of static books. The right one is the living room of dynamic Seoul. And the transition space in the middle is the nest of Seoul lights. In order to bring this concept to life in facade, regionalism, ambiguity, harmonious, and so on, I got this data set with these keywords like that. And the result of applying this data set to my math is this picture. I've mapped these images to my math to realize a appropriate my goal. I thought about dividing the wasted open space into small spaces so that I can actively use that space. I've imagined a city that everyone can enjoy, but also gives their own space, creating a harmonious relationship between the community and privacy. The left one made a calm image using the standard and designed it to be easy to understand through the curtain wall. The right one is not standard math, creating various layers of height, enabling various spatial experiences. In the meantime, the transition space was finally divided and combined to create various spaces. And for smooth connections from left to right, the components and the gradients of the landscape are used. It's a bird's eye view and a back view, and it's a side plan. Oh. In this way, I hope that Seoul Lights will settle in Seoul someday by providing such necessary space. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Yesil of Unit 3. I will start the presentation of Seoul made by the past. I searched the images at the midterm and thought about keywords reminiscent of Seoul while walking around the site. The initial keywords were street stall, leaflet, and room space. I transformed various images related to Seoul. I made 3 kinds of masks and mapped the images and choose the mask that best suit the image of Seoul. I choose a mask with leaflet attached at random. After the midterm, I thought about what kind of library I wanted to build on this site, and as the future progresses, I thought that libraries should go beyond reading books to places like public facilities where people can visit without a specific purpose. Based on this idea, I organized the image of Seoul, the site, and the library characteristics, and designed masks based on these elements. A midterm model was created through the image that the leaflets were attached to a power pole, and based on this, it was transformed in this way to combine it with the keywords in the previous diagram. The shape of the mess was taken from leaflets, so I selected the image of the leaflet and transferred it, and I applied it as the overall pattern of my mess. The park is located in the south. By connecting the park, the first floor feels like an extension of the park. There are lanes in the west and north, which are easy to access, but it's also noisy. Based on noise and accessibility, the quieter corner wall created a space for those studying, and the bookshelf space are next to it. In the north, where accessibility is best but noisy, there is a space where people can eat food brought from the market, meet up with friends for a while, and have a rest for old people who work in the nearby market. I modeled it based on this. Units which are reminiscent of a room with horizontal and vertical axes are gathered. Inside and outside of these units, there are roads reminiscent of market alleys. People can use the roads to get around the inside of the library and find their own way to use the library because the roads lead to many branches. As if there is a road each person prefer, I express the alleys of Seoul through many divided roads and spaces. Messes all have different height, and I want to give people a sense of the extension of the market nearby the site through the segment messes. Messes are connected so that people can move by stairs and lamps, and there are also several entrances and exits. On the roof, there is a component in the form of a straight line reminiscent of the tent pattern seen in the market during the site survey. The first floor allows everyone to take a walk on the outside of the library and people in the park to see each other and communicate in remote spaces. Lastly, I finished the presentation with the image of walking between units reminiscent of alleys of Seoul. Thank you.
So it's a little bit delayed, maybe 6 minutes for the questions for the students. Or yeah, maybe longer, I don't know.
Okay, so all the design process is kind of similar among three, right? So in my understanding, to find out a certain term inspired by Seoul, and then from those terms, like AI, I guess AI generates a certain 2D images, right? And then you pick some of them, and at the same time, you design a 3D whatever you want kind of manually, right? And then apply that kind of 2D map on top of the 3D, and that's the process. And then also first student kind of develop the planner idea generated from the optimization idea, right? That's the overall concept. Okay, so maybe this kind of question is maybe rather than to student to the tutor, Jimmy, I guess, because when I was a student, I also took this kind of really preset design process studio, and then always like a critique add to the tutor. This kind of final output is more like rather than if student individual, or it looks like a tutor catalog of whatever you want to produce. So how you can react this kind of.
I feel I kind of design a workflow for students to follow. Because I think this workflow is a fast way to get different ideas from different person. Because the AI style transfer image is not really the main feature in this process. The main feature of this process is when you are modeling, you constantly see an image on the side. It's like so if you ask a student, the first year freshman student to design architecture, they have no idea about what kind of space can be. But if there's an image to show the similar geometry, you can see the possibility of that. You can start to sample from there. Just like what we did in a traditional way. We design library, we go to library to look for book, to find a plan, find a geometry, find a section or any kind of drawing, and we start to trace, start to draw. But now we draw in computer, and then I just kind of curious about whether these tools can accelerate this process, but in the same time also can let the user to produce different kind of conceptual model from this process. Because the same program, same side, but different idea really fast. And maybe ideas might be meaningful for personally, or maybe has no meaning for others, but still idea. I feel this is how we do the competition, right? We have thousands of submissions, and then maybe few of them have really theoretical purpose, but most of them just born an interested space and to try to submit to see if we can hit a jackpot to win the competition. But still, we're just looking for concept. So I'm kind of using this to see what can we do in 10 days.
Right.
Get
So
different ideas.
another question is, so what if we have like a whole semester, then how are you gonna develop this idea? From now on, you develop this kind of
Yeah.
sketch and then like make a real building, or you would want to like develop this kind of sketching idea in deeper way, which direction you're supposed to go?
Just continue to rationalize, to solidify this concept of origin concept. Because for me, the concept really abstract. I don't think the most difficult part is how can you convert a concept to something buildable, and something can be really construct. And so like so in this short 10 days, only Johnny did the piece translation to get a program. So what I'm thinking for next is once we know what kind of program we are going to do, we train a model to get the best outcome of plan, so we can accelerate this process of designing something in really short amount of time. And then maybe because we got a model, and then we can adjust based on it. So at the same time, first phase conceptual, second phase get a number in and rationalize the whole thing to be buildable. So that's the ideas for whole workflow.
Yeah, I'm quite enjoyed, and then it looks really funky, and might be I've been wondering. I mean, I beside that, like a process, what's the meaning of this, exercise, or what's the significant point in the architecture argument? You know what I'm, I'm saying, right? How you position those kind of exercise into the architecture, design process, maybe in history, right? Do you have any like a tactics or strategy
In
for
terms
this?
of the technical way, or
Sorry?
I mean the question is how
There is like a postmodern or typology, like a super modernism kind of thing. There are always kind of tactics, right? There are argument how we design the building, right? So your one is unique as well. So maybe you have a kind of sense, how you locate those kind of process into the certain position in the architecture history. It's not just like doing something cool. It's not that way. Maybe so grabbing or develop or immersion from the image collection from the machine, and then that texture, how we deal with the actual building facade, maybe why that is so significant. Those kinds of questions are always aroused, right? So anyway, I'm not judging you. I'm not want to like a final thing, but you maybe have some idea about the sketch. You have some sketch idea for this, right? So
yes. The building form doesn't need to be this. It can be simple, but based on how the user use it. Like the control is by there's no like real like AI or something influence your design. And then but when people start modeling digitally, start to do some aggressive, like rigorous kind of geometry. Or maybe I don't know, just it's a kind of design tools that change the way people think, maybe. But the style transfer image is not, the texture is not really that important. Just is a way to generate those components, and component here can be a subpanel or unified, depends on. So we use the RGB to locate the points to deploy the component. So in that case, when you can apply another texture, or you can start to draw on the geometry and then control where the component goes. So you have more intuitive control on how you can generate a complex form by just simple intuition, just draw on the facade. You don't need to know how to code algorithm.
Not as a crit or like a person in the history of architecture, as a designer, like how much can you calibrate the process or the algorithm that you develop? Like when you start to go deeper using this methodology, like how much can you calibrate to make a object or a building? And another question is that like after some point you're trying, I think, like as a unit, you're trying to bring a program inside the outside, I will say as a shell, not a building. Like you're trying to introduce some sort of space or spatial sequence inside the shell. But like, is that my question is that the right way to develop this kind of methodology? Like, can you start, like, it's like you're thinking or starting to think about what's the programmatic logic in the shell. Like it doesn't have to be from past or from the reference, like it could be something else that we don't really know yet. So like my question is more about like calibration from this step.
So this is still an ongoing project, so I'm not sure where this will go. And then just and I think my initial idea about making these tools is to think about the symbolic architecture, the building we have right now is all about building form, and then but because of the technology advance, so we are able to build it, and at the same time we have really traditional all kind of building is also symbolic, but the interior program is all different. So how do you evaluate? I'm just curious about this kind of whether the symbolic of traditional need to be preserved, or we go with the new kind of form. So the drive for me to make this tool is all about the outside form, like how do we see a building as an object in the city. The program will be just a outcome product from that form right now. So we use the AI model to generate the most reasonable plan based on the training model to get a better of the program to program relationship from there.
Sorry, I'm not really familiar with any of these, so I don't know how much I can contribute to the discussion, but I mean, at least from the objective that each student introduced, aim to do, I think you fulfilled that really well. So I mean, congratulations for achieving this really fascinating outcome. The first student, using kind of heat map, color map, ending up organizing plan. I thought it's like, oh wow, like you can delegate up to that level to organize the plan. I thought it's really unusual. And also the second nest project, the smooth to rigid transition was clearly really well achieved, and the last one with the the noise as a main parameter to work with, and actually, ending up creating, spaces with a specific condition is also, quite interesting to like imagine, because it's very different from the way we normally plan or design. But this is a very conservative way of actually framing the each project, because the way I'm explaining is actually not related to this particular like a style GAN technique or technology. I think it was a bit of a shame to see very similar outcome to like 20 years ago, that it only changed to the like a visual surface treatment as a the main difference in terms of the delivering the medium from the parameter control. So maybe it's a bit misleading to actually introduce the tool in such manner. I think maybe the better way to, I mean, this is not for students, obviously, but I think a really helpful way for us to engage is actually explaining how this tool actually works, so that we can be really serious about the, the process of architecture and design, and how much of a delegation that we can actually, afford in order to create something really unusual, So, I mean, when I first saw like a YouTube of DALL-E, it's a bit insane how it kind of tried to mimicate the thinking process of human, and ending up with the very distinct, clear, delivered visual medium as a end result. And like, I'm not really interested in the end result, to be honest. I'm actually really interested in like how the program actually is being operated, so that actually I think maybe will be beneficial for all of us to actually, like, if one person goes through how style GAN really works, and then we can really discuss about whether this is a right input, and what are the specific goals that we can challenge, instead of this being like a bit of a repetitive, like a old style way of representing what computational design can be. So, but anyway, I did enjoy, and I see a lot of great possibilities that can come out from this process. So thank you very much for introducing something new.
Yeah, we have so yeah, we just continue. And,
Sorry. Ayan, parang okay. Hello, I'm Changnan. I will start the presentation. My title and concept is Dynamic Fast Network. First of all, our class took time to explore the slide and devise images of future Seoul cities and chose their building concepts. Through those times, my concepts are dynamic, fast, and network. First of all, I thought Seoul is a dynamic space, a place that moves really fast, and a place where networks of various people occur. I searched for images related to the concept and made my thoughts more concrete. I thought that as technology developed further, various more dynamic structures could form cities. And I thought that when those dynamic things came together, networks would naturally occur. So I did 3 kinds of modeling during the midterm closing. The first is a model in which the 2 buildings are made at different angles and the materials are applied to them by mixing the shapes that extend like regions. The second model looked at the fast-moving laws
and people working as if there were multiple networks. So we complete this model by creating free lines and filling in the spaces that are created in their movements. The last model is finished by creating a form of indiscriminate stretching. This is a style transfer picture. Finally is the rendering of my favorite model. However, my concept didn't seem to be clear, and I want to create a more dynamic and fast network, so I did a model study again to make the concept more visible. And I revised it specifically, thinking that it was a building that should be built as a library. The plane of the final model. First, I'll explain it with the rendered picture. I set the user as a neighbor to compensate for the accessibility of near residents and the fact that the site is large and needs to be returned. I make 7 entrances. When people work on the skyward, they can enjoy a variety of paths, and when people work under a structure, they can make the fastest shortcut in this model so people can pass naturally and use it. It couldn't survive structurally if it built a load, so I made 3 columns, small columns, large columns, and other columns. The small columns are the core and the structure. There are stairs, elevator, and toilets. Large columns with dome shape are conceptual libraries. Dynamic space, static space, and mixed space were divided into 3 categories. The conceptual library makes people enjoy the light reading environment with themselves. In other words, people can also form a network of people who fit them. And the other pillars are spaces where the integrated headquarters of peace and the staff room are gathered. It's the feeling when people enter the intersection. And it's a detailed shot of what kind of color I use and how I put the window in. People can read from the inside while looking out the window. This is the opposite view from the working way. Finally, I express the situation under the structure through rendering. BT.
Hello, my name is Jin Yu. I'm going to present about the building library. First, I show you a video. Users of the library are both adults and children, but I especially hope that it would be an active space for children to come in comfortably and read books while resting. This is because I felt that there was a lack of children's play space around the site. I also could see the reflection of Seoul on the buildings around the site, and there were many people and shopping malls in Gwangjang Market. So ideas of my project came from the keywords that are complex buildings, spacious markets, and many shopping malls. The concept model was made in the form of a building up and down to remind of the reflective city. It also expressed the complexity of Seoul and the spread of shopping malls in the market. The components are bookshelves and reading spaces. The bookshelves are dispersed, so users can spend a long time in the library looking at books without a fixed route. The exterior of a building reminiscent of Seoul gives people familiarity and allows them to enter and exit naturally. When users go inside, the diversity of levels makes the library grand. I hope the building library is a place that makes people remember Seoul. Thank you for listening.
Hi, I'm Pastor Administration. I want this presentation. I'm going to talk about the whole process that I can do from this workshop and the results I got from this, as you can see on this page. First, we had to think of what we think about Seoul, and I felt familiar with that image, and I also thought that I've seen many building facades similar to this kind of building image. Then I realized what makes this facade familiar is the grids. They're made from this facade, and tried to search for the building facade in Seoul that have similar images with this. And on the side grid of our workshop, I found many building facades with grids like that on the left side. And I also realized many of the commercial buildings that were built during 1970s and 1980s have these facades as well in Seoul. Also, our apartments we have grids on facade as well. And from this, I concluded that these grids could also be the identity of Seoul, and selected the word grid as the keyword for my project. After that, I started to get thousands of images of building facades in Seoul, images of Seoul apartments, and by using the Python code, which is the image scraper. Also, I got images of works of architects to get inspiration when I do the massing design. And from those images, I came up with 3 concept models. And while we do massing model, we get aids from AI. That AI gives us the reference images real time whenever I change the model, which means that AI gives reference images based on the similarity of my mapping model and the concept images. And then I've done the style transfer with the input image of the math design I just showed, and the reference image that AI recommends to me. And the images that you can see below are the images that are made from style transfer. And I've done the similar works for the other math designs as well. Like this, and these are the style transfer images. And also, these images below are the style transfer images. So this is the roughly rendered image with the texture that is made from tile transfer that I just mentioned. And this texture is made on the math design, and this is the concept model for my, this was my concept model for my history. After that, I started to develop my design and to consider site contact and to consider the main program of this workshop, which was the library. First, I analyzed the site contact and realized there are mainly three ways to assess the site, and there is part on the south, and Pyongyang Market and Cheonggye Stream on the north. Considering this context, I came up with this new mass design. For the facade, I first mapped the texture made from style transfer and extracted vertex color on the whole surface of the mass design, which means I use these style transfer images for texture mapping on my mass design, and I extracted vertex colors from those mass designs. Then I replaced these Giwa shaped components to the surfaces of the mass design, while differentiating the angles of those components based on the vertex color that I just mentioned onto the surface of the mass design, so that I can get the mass design. I can get more dynamic mass design from it. So this is the site plan with my final model. To talk about the color of the model, I saw so many green roofs of the buildings in Seoul. And also, since there is a park in front of the site, I felt that this green color may work as camouflage in this city, and can also harmonize with the context around around Seoul. To move on to the section, I wanted this building to work as bridge that connects the park, which is in front of the site, and the Cheonggye Stream, which is the north side of the site. So instead of having like high or like solid mass, I made like slope mass so that the circulation of people getting from park to library to stream can be natural, not blocking somewhere. So I wanted this library to be on the how to say promenade from park to Cheonggye Stream, so that people feel enjoy when they visit this place, because they are visiting the library when they are walking or they're on the promenade from the park to the Cheonggye Stream. And these are the final render images of the whole building. This is the final render image, the first render image, and this is the second render image. Lastly, if you see the section, there is arcade here, which connects the library and the farm. And this image is the rendered image of the arcade. The reason why I made such arcade is that I wanted this map to be like a site specific, which means I mentioned that I want to connect the park and the stream in the on the north side and the south side of the site. And I also made the program to be related, which means I wanted to make this arcade so that people, when they visit, they visit both the market and the library, and so that this library relates with those contexts around these sites. So yeah, this is the end of my presentation.
I, I mean, a lot of things were said in the first part of the critic, but this time I agree with most, but I actually want to compliment. Parametricism, there's a degree of
feedback loop that needs to be created for us to really take agency control. And I think your project, when you started using the material of HEWA, and then for the first project, when you actually started thinking about how the models are ordered and applied onto the form, I think that's where like the agency of the architect starts to come out. But when it doesn't, that kind of becomes a tool for playing to make form, I think that's when the argument gets lost. So I don't know how these things are done, but I do think that architecture sometimes, our discipline is very self-referential, and we only look at things that we get. And in some ways, I don't necessarily think that this is a bad thing, that we use machine learning to get inspiration one way or the other. But I think the danger lies in when we just let that thing go and then have that dictate everything we should. So in some ways, when we can see the feedback loop come into place, like Riser, Miyamoto, or Daniel Liebskin, or even Liebskin Woods, like their drawings are very precise, despite the form movement. And I think this kind of method, I think, can also benefit from extreme precision, just because it's using a lot of machine power. But overall, I think 10 days, I would do that. So,
Thank you very much for the presentation. Again, very impressive. I don't want to repeat and compliment about this 10 days. Complimentary. I think the first project, how even the form was actually driven from the initial essentially quite incredible. And then, I mean, the second one was very similar to previous iterations that we saw in terms of the texture, but still like achieving that. Third one, wow, I mean, I see so much potential in this example. But if this is not criticism for students, I would say maybe it's a possible room for next year's review if you come back as you did. I think we really need to discuss more about the king and the possibility, and not use this whole process as a justification of the proposal. Because that's the least interesting part. I really thought when I saw the study of the third one, it really just talked about the facade, as a initiative. And there are many great examples that we could have actually sampled. We could have actually been really serious about the questioning about the agency that you already mentioned. Because in Ritiro and many other residential areas, along with the modernist development was like a very distinctive aesthetical feature, like chashi, like the Iladashi, which is like a super famous independent publication amongst students, and also Katato. I think if you actually have taken these as references, and because us humans already have gone through evolutionary process of actually making the facade, but out of actual needs, it already creates very unique, not only the unique forms, opportunities forms, but also the size. And if we actually end up testing these, as a GAN example class, something a bit unusual that will not happen at the site, not like a mega form, but like really serious, like a small form, like the facade exploration. I thought it could have been because it questions about the aesthetics and the material culture that our human creates locally, along with the visual identity. But also, it is a real spatial practice that can be also suggested by the AI, what the next generation of the urban farming can. So I seriously urge and question whether the megaform is actually the right medium to test this serious tool. I really think. Because I know it's a really easy way to apply the texture and actually create this like a big visual shock, but it doesn't really create an interesting discussion.
So actually from the second student's example, what I found super interesting was the index outcome before the form application. When I saw like a parts of the images as like a hybridized image of multiple references, I thought, oh wow, that could easily be a part of Seoul's building fabric, but it doesn't quite belong there. So it's really quirky. And what if we take that little segment and then put it right, juxtaposed right next to the existing building type, and then really think about our building conventions and the building fabric. And also the reference recommendations that the AI generates, the software student also, sorry, I'm not calling you by your name, sorry. Reference recommendation, I thought that's actually much more fascinating as a design agency. So, can we really discuss about the tool is my general comment, and really congratulations for great out. Thank you.
We have 3 more students, and then
Can I start my presentation? Hello, I'm Soon Lee in Unit 3. The previous video was my library, and the concept of this library is on nanometry. I tried to make some kind of complex library. The categories are dissolved and recombination to L's like a maze. So in a book L, people can see only some people and don't know what kind of books they are reading from each other. These concepts were derived during image scraping for Seoul. I focused on apartments and signboards as a typical image of Seoul, and I got anonymity as a keyword. These are the results of style transfer with Blender model and image of dataset, and I applied this transferred image as a texture again. This is to choose the location of color component. This is the result of applying color components to the surface of the model. A component was placed to particular vertex colors of the image. Thank you for listening.
Hello, my name is Sang-tae Kim of Unit 3. Each country's cities has a unique view of city, but in general, when you are in a city, you don't get a chance to see the whole view of the city. I want to show you the feeling of Seoul city view through the interior and exterior of buildings. At first, I collected data by setting keywords. I collected data related to Korea, Seoul, and architectures, such as Seoul's landscape, Hanok, Samulnori, OMA, MBRDB, and so on. Based on this data, this is a style transfer image considering simple mass and the surrounding environment. My concept is entropy and negentropy. I saw Seoul as a coexistence of entropy and negentropy. A panoramic view of Seoul with various heights and colors is an entropy concept with a high degree of freedom. On the other hand, the view of Hanok with a static and similar appearance is a low freedom concept of negentropy. The characteristic of two concepts were divided into the upper and the lower parts of buildings. The lower part is entropy, and there's a program that has high degree of freedom. The upper part is made up of static chemical space with negentropy. The library was intended to become a new landmark of Eujido and blend the characteristics of DDP and Gwangjang markets, which had polar character size that symbolized Eujido. That is the concept model that was announced during the midterms. I divided entropy and negentropy through the image search and construct two types of mass. Each mass was continuously overlapped to emphasize each characteristic. And I added colors and components here and added the details to the facade. Entropy concept maps use reflective glass to show various colors using surround signs, arbor trees, and weather to increase entropy. On the contrary, the mass of the concept of negentropy use opaque glass to create a calm and static atmosphere. So finally, I have this model. At the bottom of the building, parks, lecture halls, and sports facilities and space similar to Gwangjang markets are arranged to allow diverse activities to take place. The library and the exhibition room were placed at the top of the building to create a static atmosphere. Finally, through the movements line connecting the Gwangjang markets and DDP that penetrates the building, a scene of openness and the space where the Gwangjang markets or the Peace Market can be connected continuously. I express K something in this way. And thank you for your attention.
My name is Yerin of Unit 3. My project name is The Stacking City. I think Korea is a country with a higher economic size and population density compared to each land area. So rapid economic development, which began in the 1970s, only built vertically on blocks. The programs that consist of buildings are densely packed like a single elevation. I wanted to show the programs that were accumulated over time. So I scraped images that are related to stacking, something like signboards, facade of high-rise buildings, or the apartments that are densely packed. So these are my 3 art models in midterm. In first step, I draw stacking unit, which is recognized as programs and make them form of stacking them over and over again. And put details in mass with all add-on, all shows me the related images that which I split. And this is my final mess. And first, I consider site context for making forms. There are many markets around the site, including Pyonghwa Market. So I thought my library users are people who go to the market. And I specified the category of the book as stuff sold in surrounding market. For example, baking or packaging and so on. So I decided to stack and connect programs of each category's books, like what I think how about Seoul. To connect different categories, I made commercial zone between categories. For example, if I is interested in baking, so getting the baking zone, I can go to the machine tools through the cooking utensils store. There's connection between programs, so it has algorithms. I want to make textures or using the photos that I took in my site and images that I script. Then I made style transfer images like this. I put style transfer image in each 3 types of zone, commercial, alley, reading. I define a characteristic of each zone and put images each zone. For example, commercial zone is where combines different programs, so I put images that signboards and the stuff sold in market. At last, I put units, which mean categories, in my mess. So this is my final result image. Thank you for listening.
So when I took a studio like 14 years ago by Hernan Diaz Alonso from Dean of SciArc now, he always like mentioned to us, try to apply whatever you design and apply that thing to make stairs, which means he always like focused on, even though this kind of non-scale component, try to make it part of architecture element, something like that. So in kind of basically this is a scale issue because everything is so huge, like really like a mega scale structure. Even though you deal with a kind of huge scale, I think like for the next step, you guys really focus on how these kind of components like apply into the smaller scale, like really come into the like people's daily life or something like that. You can see like roughly see some of the small boxes floating around, but what if you just like apply, for example, like in the previous students show us some kind of section, but sectional slab is totally separate from the kind of outer whatever that is. So most of things are kind of, this is kind of interior, but I really want to see how this kind of like a sectional drawing, this kind of component idea apply outside and inside and the wall or like the steps or handrail, that kind of thing. So basically, I want to say, this is kind of like a not real building. It can be a real building. It's just like a kind of fake building, but I don't want to say this is fake architecture. It is still architecture to me. But for example, the previous one, the kind of glass looking structure, whatever that is, it can be any kind of material, but totally fine with the materiality or structure. It doesn't really matter. If some client unlucky student, lucky client or unlucky client, whatever who is, it can support this thing to architects, totally fine. But I want to say to per se double to make it per se this kind of idea, try to really focus on this can be the real every part of architecture. It's not just like a roughly mega structural installation. It should be really focused on try to make it everything in the real architecture, which means walls, as I mentioned before, walls, stairs, and doors, whatever they have. So that's one of the kind of possibility how this kind of architecture makes it sense more than this. But I'm totally fine with this kind of the scale, but I just want to say something more than this one. You should think about that. That's my comment.
Yeah, thank you for focusing on the comment on student. I think I know this is a tool still try to develop and then try to experiment. And then I guess I'm more interested about design a tool for general public. Like we in the school we talk about theory architecture, and then is in the world, but in reality we don't really design architecture in that way. I mean, for 90% of our other kind of architecture design is done by calculating the floor footage or just, and I kind of feel this might be valuable for computation design or something, but I think it's valuable for students to as a way to train like how to design a building, find inspiration, come to ideas, find building form to stay with the same concept, and then in the end have some visual to talk about the concept story. And so really appreciate to focus on the student instead of the tools. And then yeah, that's my I think now we just like we talk about DALL-E and Midjourney. I feel architect like using other people's tools to design something fancy, something cool, but you are not really in the control of using the tools. And then we like to talk about authorship, but in the same time, you are not really the author to design the tools. And then those kind of new journey still create interesting images. All the code, all the data set is correct, be right by someone else. You still find interesting from there because the images is fresh for you. And this image, this design, you have already seen this in the past, like maybe 20 years, because this is the way we design. But for students, this is the way how we train. But so I like to say my tool is like fake AI because it's still really traditional way of thinking. But I think it's a really good training process to teach students to consistent to think about idea, concept, and then finish it. Yeah, thank you.